we meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. If this capsule history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
We are here today on the Energy Impact Podcast, a very special episode, episode 100.
3 digits.
3 digits. With Michael Crabb, the VP of Finance at Last Energy. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here and be on the other side of the mic.
This is a very special podcast because at every 50, 100, whatever it is, we interview one of our own to give people a little look into what our organization is and how it runs, but also to showcase the incredible talent that we've brought on board, and this is no exception. Michael, you've been an invaluable team member since the moment you came on, leading our finance, now running commercial sales for us as well. And so this episode is really going to be a testament to the work that you've done. But before we get to that, we'd love to learn a little bit about you first. So tell us, where did you grow up?
The infamous question. So I was actually born in upstate New York, in Rochester, which seems to have like this bizarre 3 degrees of separation from everyone. And we moved around quite a bit as a kid, but I grew up effectively in Omaha, Nebraska, since I was 5. Never thought I would be there. Didn't think I would stay there for school. Ended up staying there for school. Didn't think I would stay there for work. Ended up staying there for work for a decade, and moved here to Washington, D.C. about 2 years ago.
Well, you just yada over your whole
You gotta go
career.
all the way through.
What did you study?
So I studied architectural engineering. So I was always interested in math and always interested in music. And so
You have a special musical talent, don't you?
I started playing violin when I was 5, and played all the way through second, third year of high school. When you're young, you pick it up quickly and you get pretty good at it. And my parents forced us to practice a lot, so that was good. It was just a theme in my life, and I could certainly talk about how valuable I think that music and music lessons are.
We'd love to hear it.
Oh, let's go. Let's get right into it.
Here's a little pun, hear it.
Well, I can't give you credit for that. It's too painful. If I encourage one, I'll encourage that. I think that for me, the perspective of individual music instruction, right, is all the benefits of any other extracurricular you can imagine. So you have individual instruction from another adult. You have the requirement to evaluate yourself objectively against a broader universe. You have the requirement to play with other people. You have the requirement to memorize and understand patterns and intervals and different, music is effectively a base 8 log of math, right? You have thirds and fifths and octaves.
Which followed through in your education as well.
Right? So memorization, training, practice, right? All of these things are parallels as far in my life. And that was the origin of leading me into architectural engineering, really to, as a sort of naive, hopeful teen, to design concert halls.
I didn't know that part.
Yeah, so that was senior year of high school. We were expected to do this senior project. And a little bit of a cruel irony. My mom, she really hated the senior project because it was meant to keep seniors engaged in school. But she was like, no, I'm making my kids do all these extracurriculars, they're doing all this work, they don't need to do some BS senior project. And here I found this super cool senior project to design, sort of model mathematically a concert hall locally with one of the PhD students at the local university. A lot of people did if you were a basketball player, you did how to play basketball instruction video, kind of a BS thing, but here I was going to the local university and like downloading the, God, I don't even remember the program at this point, but you have a point source of sound, and you can model that in three-dimensional space. So that was like a super cool, and I was like, okay, well, this is the first thing that I've seen that is real, like a real-life application of something that I like doing. So, let me go. I'm going to go explore this. Not thinking at the time like, oh, this is a very narrow field, right?
Yeah.
We can get to that later, but so I stayed there, and University of Nebraska has one of the best acoustics professors in the nation. So I got to study with her and in their architectural engineering program.
And just before we move on from your childhood, and I have the privilege of having a little extra knowledge about your upbringing. Just can you comment on the role that your other family members like played on your development as a person?
Oh boy, yeah. I didn't realize it was a public psychology session.
You don't have to.
No. I think you've met my parents.
Who are awesome.
They are awesome, and now they're grandparents, so they're coming more often. I think our family. They always sort of like treated us as adults, I guess. And like if you have physicians of parents, like the dinner table isn't, oh, I don't like my boss. Dinner table is, oh, I had this really challenging surgery, and like the newspaper, like the magazines around are medical journals, which are kind of gross, but like you grow up around that. My dad's very musical. His dad was very musical. Both sets of 3 of the 4 grandparents were immigrants, looking back, like everyone I think has some level of luck, and I was lucky to have 2 great parents and a little sister that challenged me to get better and stay in front of her.
Well, that's the part that was
that's you're trying to get out of.
No, because listen, you have a competitive instinct here that I have come to place great value on. I think it's definitely helped you throughout your career, and I think it helps you here, and is a quality that we look for employees, and you show in spades. So I thought it'd be good to mention, where that competitive instinct came from.
Yeah, well, if you can imagine it, I think my sister is maybe more competitive, or at least more willing to sacrifice her own well-being for, the odd football toss or what have you. But yeah, still pretty competitive to this day, I'd say.
Let's take you through college. Let's get beyond that. When you joined Tanasa, was that your first job?
First job, the story's kind of funny. Actually, I had a podcast guest that had a similar sort of experience the other day. Yes, the architectural engineering program was a 4+1 program. So 4 years, Bachelor of Science undergrad, and then a 5th year for your master's. And it was, advertised as a real benefit because it was accelerated, right? They sort of started doing some master's stuff your senior year. You got the accredited degree to get your engineering degree and engineering license to practice. I interned for a mechanical engineering firm between my junior and senior year. Great firm, great people, absolutely hated the work. So here I was 3 years in, and like kind of finally dawning on me that there's only so many concert halls built every year. There's only so much additional analysis that you could do and people are willing to pay for. Most of the work is designing ductwork and plumbing and stuff that's really important and makes for comfortable buildings, but I couldn't, oh my gosh, I couldn't do it. I could not do it. And so here I was going into a senior year, which is getting very specialized at this point, thinking, holy cow, what am I going to do? I haven't even thought about other career trajectories, right? Let alone created a plan. And I sort of hopped around talking to people, and I ended up connecting with a family friend who had grown up with their kids, and they kind of knew what I was about. And he said, "Hey, our private equity firm is thinking about starting an internship program. You should apply." And I didn't know what private equity was. I didn't know what energy was. I didn't realize what an opportunity this was. This is just someone that I'd known for my whole life, sort of say, or most of my life, say, "Hey, you should check it out," casually. I ended up applying and ended up getting the internship. I found out.
But you call it private equity. But when I think of private equity, I think of it as a pure financial entity. But this was a specialist firm, right? Like real domain expertise across oil and gas, right?
Yeah, I would, private equity is just the financial structure. So you can have very specialized private equity. You can have private equity that looks at different size deals. You can have private equity that looks at different industries or sub-industries. I think a lot of private equity advertises some special market niche, otherwise how could you justify sort of the fees that you're being given? So most private equity, they have some value add that they talk about. That's not always true. This firm, Tanasa, was a subset, or Tanasa Capital Management was the private equity, was a subset of a private energy company called Tanasa.
Okay, got it.
And so that Tanasa was really formed as a power plant developer in the early 90s. So energy markets were deregulating. A group of folks, we call it 2 men in a truck. I think it was 9 guys in a truck, kind of left their utility jobs or pipeline jobs or whatever they were doing. This is, as Enron was becoming a thing, right? Like private participation in gas and power and power generation was starting to become a thing. And so they developed gas-fired power plants, brought all the contracts together, long-term revenue contracts, financed them, and generated enormous cash flow and wealth and value over time.
How much? What was the total assets under management? Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, that's the right way for the private equity. So Tanasa is the developer, what I was just saying. Assets under management maybe is not quite the right way. I want to say 10, 11 gigawatts of gas-fired power generated.
A lot of power.
A pretty large amount. Now, they sold some of that equity off, but they retained a decent portion of it. And then were very smart at building additional businesses on top of that cash flow. So they didn't just sit around and say, okay, yeah, we did our job and we'll hang out. They built the largest gas marketing and trading business, or one of the largest gas trading businesses in the country, and now one of the largest power trading businesses in the country. And the group I started around 04, maybe a little earlier, they said, okay, everyone's now built power plants like we did. There's too many of them. They're overbuilt. So let's stop building them. Maybe we can buy them, right? Think about a neighborhood that gets overbuilt, and then this is kind of your cycle. Now they're cheap. Let's raise capital to buy them. We have the operating expertise, right? Here's that niche expertise that really sat in that firm. And they were quite successful with their first fund and quite successful with the second fund. I started as we were still operating and optimizing the first fund's assets, and then investing in the second fund.
And the people who were so smart to diversify the business, or let's say transition the business at just the right time, were they still active, and did they serve as mentors to you as you grew through your career? Yeah,
for sure. Both the people that had that foresight, one of my family friends was one of those sort of founders of that part of the business, right? The nice thing if you're private, you don't have to transition. You can do both. You can keep placing your bets and ride the wave, so to speak. But they brought in then additional talent that was used to being in sort of a fiduciary management role. There were a couple of mentors there. Some that were there for my whole career at Tanasa, which we can talk more about, and some that were there for 4 years, 5 years, and then even peers of mine at the time. I remember I'm coming in as an intern with no finance degree. I had econ and math minors. They didn't think I could do anything but get coffee, and I just sat around asking people questions and whiteboarding sessions. And I do joke that I think sometimes having really low expectations helped, because I could do nothing but blow them away. So I was an intern for really just 3 months, but August 1st, they said, hey, how do you like it? And this is super fun. And they said, well, why don't you come on full time?
That's amazing.
I withdrew from class. I still lived on campus for a year.
So what was the first thing you started doing where you demonstrated real productivity at that organization?
Oh my God. It was too small of a shop to have literally no productivity out of the gate, right? So, it took me a few months to kind of get my feet wet, understand the language, understand how the financial models were used as part of that underwriting and investment process. But it's sort of gradually, and then all at once, you're supporting a deliverable, then all of a sudden you're owning that deliverable, and then you're owning another deliverable, and I don't know if I could point to a specific thing.
Do you remember the first time you felt proud of a work product?
I think one of the first ones I remember was actually for a code generation facility in New York, Brooklyn Navy Yard. Maybe a 200 megawatt gas-fired asset, and it had an electric and steam contract that was invented and negotiated and drafted in the early 80s. And the way a power agreement tends to evolve is then you have amendments to that over time as things come up that the parties didn't contemplate. And sometimes they amend and restate the entire agreement. And other times they just add stuff. It's 7 pages and we're adding this clause and that clause. And so by the time, this was in 2012 maybe, you have this whole history of documents, and a 100-page document is now 1,000 pages, which may or may not still be applicable. And it had this super convoluted, if you're producing steam up to this much and this quality, you have this price, and I think it was 1,000 lines of Excel code in order to kind of map out what this pricing structure would look like. And no one wanted to do that work because it was mind-numbing. And the associate that I was working with, he didn't really want to go through and check all that work and do all that work. And so that was one of the first moments I was like, okay, now I really understand contracting. I can translate it into an Excel model, and then I can tell you what it means in the PowerPoint for the investment thesis. And that was the earliest one I can remember. Is okay, oh, it's not that hard. I've got the definitions down, I've got the math down, and then I've got the sales pitch down. Let's just keep doing that.
Tell us about the culture, the finance culture. I'm sure people who are from the finance industry know how hard it can be. But I want you, from your experiences, to compare it to what your average friend's job was at that time as you were in your mid-20s.
Yeah, I mean, I will say the nice thing about being buy side is that it isn't investment banking, which is your traditional 16-hour days, 6 days a week, and then maybe it's only 10 on Sundays. And even with some pullback on that expectation, it's still pretty hard charging kind of work and high volume work. On the buy side, maybe it was 70, 80-hour weeks, and sometimes it was less, and sometimes we were there until 3 a.m. prepping for an investment committee kind of the following day.
And do you have any sense of how that culture gets set and how those expectations get set? Because I feel like if you went to anyone who wasn't in the finance world, or maybe some sort of consulting, and you asked them to do that, they would just quit. Why is it that young, ambitious finance people think that's just normal and commit to that?
Yeah, well, it's big stakes. Right? You can do the same.
But not for them personally.
Not for the junior folks personally, but it's driven. Culture is going to be set from the environment that you're in, and it's big stakes. And the opportunity for you to be personally involved in big stakes moving forward is, I think, part of the drive.
It's motivating.
Yeah, for sure. Because it is, look, the markets are the most objective judge of success. You either did it or you didn't, and luck plays a large part in that. But at the end of the day, it's a results-driven business, and so I think that level of sort of market competition, combined with the incentive, combined with just the raw horsepower that gets attracted to those two first pillars, I think creates kind of that competitive, driven culture. That is still set intentionally from the organizations, but is supported by people that are willing and excited to be exposed to that much intelligence, that many deals, that much learning in that quick of an environment.
Yeah. Without going into too much detail, just staircase us through your escalation in your career through Tanasa.
Yeah, so on the private equity side, that was approximately 5 years. Right, started as an analyst. Moved up to an associate, and then a bit of a senior associate role right at the very end. We made a couple of investments. I really focused on refinancing our existing assets. We ultimately combined each fund's assets into a single portfolio and sold those to respective other private equity funds. So that was 15-16 time frame. As we were kind of winding down those funds, The original thesis didn't really hold anymore. It wasn't so much overbuilt, prices were too high. I worked in kind of a skunkworks development organization within Tanasa to do LNG for high horsepower applications.
Liquefied natural gas.
I knew you were going to correct me, but I had to finish the sentence. Yeah, so this was like high horsepower barging, trucking, not the big Cheniere and Sabine Pass like export facilities, just local use cases to replace dirty fuels. The business case looked great when oil was $110 a barrel, and then sometime in 2016 you had kind of the last major commodity crash. Maybe my first. I mean, everyone has to have some experience with that in this space. At $35 a barrel, it didn't look very good, and it was probably 4 or 5 years too early for the ESG movement. So as that business case sort of unraveled, there was an opportunity with someone leaving the company to step into really what my kind of core skill set at the time was a corporate M&A and strategy function. So I sort of split my time between operations, broader corporate strategy supporting one of the SVPs, and then building our origination and investment thesis for Tanasa.
Can you get a little bit more granular with, let's say for the layperson, what were you going after in that last part of the role?
Yeah. So it evolved quite a bit. I actually, there were some real challenges that taught me a lot on how to think about investing. Because it was easy in private equity, you have a thesis, someone gives you a bunch of money to execute on that thesis. Your job is to single-mindedly focus on that thesis. In a corporate space, right, so Tanasa as a business had a balance sheet, had cash that it had to hold in the business, and had to have assets on its balance sheet. So it wanted to reinvest in the business and grow the business. So the question is, okay, well, what are the best ways to do that? And how do you manage risk and return? And so now, instead of just looking at North American gas-fired power plants, now I could look at services businesses. Now we could look at like gas terminals businesses. We spent some time looking at different financial products. So when I started, like what's the habit for everyone is you do what you know. That we're looking at power assets. That is what I was used to looking at. But it became clear that it was overpriced. We didn't want to spend money there. We did buy a combined cycle in Massachusetts. But it didn't make sense to continue to invest in sort of a sole concentrated asset class. Instead, it was like, okay, well, we're really good at trading gas. We're really good at scheduling and trading power. What are the other things we can be good at? And or where do we see gaps in the market? And so that's how my sort of how I grew up as an investor, right? Where if I learned all like the raw material as an analyst and associate, really having to create this investment thesis and strategy for a business is where I felt like I finally converted that into a real value creation mechanism.
But let's just make that a little bit more tangible for a second. Like, just rattle off some of the types of businesses that you were looking to acquire or assets that you were looking to acquire. So give us a long.
Yeah. So obviously we still looked at power assets. We had some development opportunities. We looked at a couple of fuel cell deals. We looked at investing in some other development platforms for various technologies. We organically built out a large portfolio of wind and solar assets. We looked at some liquids storage terminals. When you distribute gas and diesel fuel and what have you throughout the country, you see those big tanks. We looked at investing in some of those. We looked at investing in debt instruments on existing assets, so buying financially minority positions in project debt. So you just step into the obligation of that lender. What else did we look at?
And as you're evaluating these things, I think what I want to hear from you is when you finally got the opportunity to broaden your scope and look at so many different types of businesses, were you developing a new type of like pattern matching as to like what is a good business, what generates money, what is risky? Like, did you feel like you developed your own like intuition around that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more about look, you're not investing your own money. Someday maybe I'll be investing my own money and then it's my risk reward. I think what I learned is that's really this fiduciary duty thing that gets talked about. It's really your investors. So my evolution wasn't so much my own risk reward, it was being able to recognize and adopt to the people's risk reward who I was being asked to find opportunities for.
Wow, okay, that is interesting. That is an interesting perspective. And
I would say that's harder because what people tell you is not necessarily what they think.
That is true, but maybe it's also easier to combat your own biases if you can remind yourself it's someone else's money and it's not my money. So you don't accidentally chase after shiny objects that are just personally interesting.
The flip side is it can make you more optimistic, right? Because if it's not, you don't feel the pain the same way you would if it was your own.
Yeah.
So the flip side is you do still have to think about it as your own sort of investment decision, and ethically need to, and really just like being professional about it. You have to believe in the product.
But it allows you to step out of the
you have to be objective,
yeah.
and you have to be able to remember you're translating everything into that pitch and that identifying risks and mitigants for that audience.
Yeah.
And that process, that investment committee sort of process, is effectively what creates institutional objective decision making.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to ask about, because you've demonstrated incredible propensity to understand business models and contracting structures, and have brought that incredible value to this organization as well. Is that because you got to see so many different businesses and read their contracts? Is that where that came
for
from?
sure. I mean, we were on all different sides. I mean, that was the nice thing about Tanasa. It probably didn't have the volume the way you might have in investment banking, but I got more depth in every single one of the deals. And we still read all of the the data room for these assets has all of these contracts, has different problems. Mm-hmm. Your whole job is to identify the problems, right? And then figure out how you would solve them if you own the asset. And then on top of that, not only was I just reading someone else's work, we had a whole work stream where we were doing our own development work, right? Where we had to solve our customer problems. We were finding partners and working with operating assets.
Almost like reading a study book and then taking a test.
You're doing this cool sort of feedback loop, if you will, on both sides.
Yeah, cool.
And smart people, right? I mean, look, it was watching how our internal senior team reacted and thought about things and found creative solutions. You're always sort of just tweaking what you've seen before.
Yeah. Let's fast forward to the transition when you put in 10 years there, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, very impressive. So we don't need to ask, we don't need to make you articulate why you left. You pay your dues. But what, I guess, attracted you to our organization? What was it about that time in your life? And, I mean, listen, you hadn't left Nebraska, and somehow you decided to move across the country. Like, what was that about?
Yeah, so many ways to take this. So I think I struggled a little bit really articulating at the time kind of what was pulling me out. Looking back, it was really an opportunity to test. Like, I felt like I had learned a lot from the people at the company, and I really wanted an opportunity to test if that was the case, right? You know what I mean? Like, there's something, because I've been there so long and I knew they were all smart people, and you only put so many smart people in a room before the next smart person doesn't really add that much value. And I think there's a component of just trying to find opportunities for someone else that is a little bit over time, maybe less fulfilling at my stage. So I started to kind of just exploring what was happening, and this is still mid-COVID a little bit.
Was that right?
Yeah, it was 2021.
Yeah. Well, we just ignored COVID.
Yeah. In Nebraska, it was, we moved to, in Nebraska it was over, and we moved to DC, and it was everything was still locked down.
Surprise!
It's totally different. I struggled, because I had I had full geographic flexibility, even though I'd been in Nebraska forever, and so people didn't know how to think about that. I thought I was bullshitting or whatever it was. And I didn't know if I didn't really want to stay buy side, because I had looked at all of these wind and solar projects and the economics were just not good. Right? If I wanted to do wind and solar, I would have stayed there and just continued to kind of invest at 4, 5, 6%, or at least telling myself I was going to make 4, 5, 6%. And so I was just sort of exploring what was out there, and got connected through a network of mine to you. And the SMR thing was I don't know. I didn't think about it. I looked at every technology you could think of, but for nuclear in a decade. And I still remember, I think our first call, I just spent an hour peppering you with questions, which I think is why we connected right away.
Yeah, I do appreciate your question.
Because I just was like, the more I tried to unwrap kind of how you were thinking about it, the more I realized that it was basically the same development platform that I'd seen 100 times before, but with a product that was a clear premium product.
And it's interesting, I didn't have the vocabulary around development platform at that time. You were the one who's brought that idea and institutionalized the best practices of a development platform into our organization. I had a very nascent view as to what just kind of made sense, understanding the challenges of the nuclear industry being delivery and not technology.
Well, and I think that was part of what was attractive to me about it, right? Is meeting more of the team, having to do my own research on sort of what nuclear looked like. We can kind of talk about that. I think everyone goes through a similar journey. But I think what really sort of sealed the deal for me, what really kind of made it the right fit, is I could see that there was clear value add. I could see there are things that sort of from a venture capital perspective and a business building perspective would be different, right? Going from an established 35-year-old company with 11 billion in revenue to a startup company.
Don't set a revenue number.
It's very different. It's very different. It's an entirely different mindset. But these are all things as an investor you talk about, right? Like when we would step back and sit around like how we want to allocate capital and what, investors want to be operators and operators always want to be investors. Because you talk about what these things are and they sound so easy, right? Oh, just set up a process and then you watch the sales roll in, And of course it's not like that. So the opportunity to kind of learn some of that business building, but also clear opportunities where I could bring value immediately was a pretty attractive blend. Because I don't think you ever want to be one or the other, right? If you really are just jumping in and you don't know anything, that's maybe not the right place. If you know everything, then why would you really spend more time doing it? You know what I mean? Having that blend, I think, is super important.
You had just gotten married?
We just got married. I accepted the job maybe 4 or 5 weeks before the wedding. So we got married with an empty house, and the Wednesday after our wedding, loaded the dog into the car and drove cross country.
Can you tell us about that conversation at home, and was it a mutual decision? How did it all play out?
Yeah, well, no, it was actually, my wife had ended up getting a remote role earlier that year in March with a global immigration firm. Her partners are based in New York City. So this was kind of a COVID-enabled thing that they were like, hey, this is process-oriented legal work. We can find talent everywhere. If we kind of open up for select partners that want to manage that way, we can do it. And she's had a great experience. But that really created a ton of flexibility. The other thing that was nice is she's not from Omaha. So we met in Omaha. She was attracted there for her first job out of law school. But it always felt like she was a visitor in my city. Even after 4 or 5 years, she was friends with all my friends, I had met all of her friends, it still kind of felt like I'd been there 20 years more than she had, right? And it actually worked out to be, she was super excited to go on a new adventure, and she didn't have family that she was leaving behind. It wasn't a super hard sell, even though we both love Omaha. What ended up being really nice is it created this breakpoint. It created breakpoint's the wrong word. It created a step change in the relationship.
An opportunity to build a life.
Yeah, it was a new thing, like getting married, and instead of just being in the same house and doing the same things with the same people, it was now we're gonna go and have our adventure together. So it was kind of a nice thing of now we're going off into the world. It's just sounds super corny, but it was really nice.
Well, I'm glad she let me know.
Yeah, we love it. Yeah, we love it. I love it.
So you join. What was the first thing that surprised you once you came on the inside that maybe you had a different thought of, a different expectation? And how many people were we at the time?
I was 21, I think.
Okay.
Narrowly beaten out for 20.
You've moved up the rankings since well.
Yeah.
And now we're at 60 for posterity's sake.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, my team doubled this week, which has been fantastic.
Is awesome.
Yeah, it's really fun. Yeah, I think I was surprised. This might be too generic for you. There were some things that I was like, oh my gosh, we haven't even considered this. I remember like the first thing was like, no, like electric interconnections are really hard, and this isn't even on anyone's radar.
You're still going on and on.
Oh my god!
Like, we'll figure it
oh
out.
my god, we need to think about this. But then there are things that we've like, and then there are things that had, like were so advanced, right? Like some of the systems around government engagement and some of the P&IDs and some of the technical maturity. Like there were some things that were like so much more advanced than I thought, and then some things that like, oh my god, guys, like someone needs to focus on this, and we need to like get some
the true development functions.
Yeah, it's like, oh,
we had no idea.
Let's go do this thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are some things that it was like, I don't know. Again, like from an investor standpoint, business building looks linear, but I know it wasn't. You fundamentally know it isn't, but you don't really appreciate what that sort of chaos, like organized chaos, looks like until you're kind of doing it.
You can just call it chaos. It's okay. You don't.
It's like guided chaos. It had right, like it is like. It's our conversation earlier, right? How much chaos is the right amount of chaos, right? It was like really the right way to think about it.
And then now I'm going to make you answer an uncomfortable question that we've never spoken about. What was going through your head at the time that you didn't want to tell me because you were too new, that you were maybe worried about, or now's a chance to true confession.
Oh man. What was I terrified to say?
Or did you just say everything that was in your mind?
I mean, I'm pretty. Yeah, I think for me, it's like how much I'm willing to argue it. Like, I will tell you, right? I will tell you, and you can listen to it or not, and depending on how comfortable I am or like how seriously I feel about it, it's like how much I'll argue for it.
Yeah. Do you remember any early debates between us?
I think the biggest...
when was the first time you got me to change my mind? That's another good one.
Have I got you to change?
Oh, come on.
I have.
If anyone at this organization has, it's you.
That's true. I think some of the I don't know the first one. I still remember there are like certain things that you wanted to think about. Your tendency to want to push everything onto the project's investors, I think, was one that I was like, which is great. Which sounds great.
You're saying risk.
Risk, yeah. Anytime there was a barrier, it is an easy thing. This is what's hard about development. You're doing development broadly. You want the deal. It feels better to keep the deal alive than to kill it. And so you just sort of let the shit pile up, right? And so there's a tendency to say, oh, we'll price over that, or we'll, you can do that for some things, but you can't do it for everything because all of a sudden those things compound, right? And so I think that was some education that I had to do for you on like, okay, here is how, it's not venture capital power distribution, right? It's not like you do 10 deals and 8 fail and 2 are home runs. Mm-hmm. No, you do 10 project finance deals, maybe one of them you get your money back, and then everyone else is somewhere in 3 to 10%. That's not, obviously there's different pockets of capital, but that way of thinking, I think we sort of worked through what that right balance was.
Yeah, you had to impress upon me the conservatism of this capital class, but not only the conservatism, within the capital class, there's always going to be a distribution of risk, but what that shape looked like. Yeah. And if I just assumed a bell curve distribution like I would assume in any other scenario, how that might put the business at risk, given that there might not be enough tail end opportunities for us to like get a home run of everything we ever wanted without giving anything up.
That's right.
That's what I remember too, or like early learnings from you. Interesting. Okay, any kind of key moments? Well, yeah, what was the moment at this organization that you felt was your biggest first win? Like that you're like, I did this and I'm proud.
I don't know how much I'm actually allowed to talk about it.
High level talk.
I think I think the traction, so yeah, given the context we just talked about on managing risk and that distribution of outcomes, I still think we went out with an appropriate, but expecting kind of a narrow universe of folks. And I also thought as we went to market with project capital investors that I would have to do a lot of nuclear education. And it really wasn't the case. I think there was some self-selection, which is again why you run a broad process. But I was first very pleased by just the level of feedback and support and interest, and then have been quite pleased on where certain indications are coming out from a project.
You're answering a different question than I asked. I asked, when were you proud of yourself?
Well, I'm trying to certain interim results of those processes. I think I've been incredibly proud, both of myself and of the team. Look, we're doing the first of just about everything, and so
except technology.
Except technology. It's kind of true. We're doing all the first on like the boring stuff, right?
That's our business model.
Well, what is the joke on some of the energy transition is all about where you draw the line of right? Like first is all about where you draw the line, right? So we're not going to be the first project financing, but we'll be the first nuclear project financing.
Yeah,
right. We're not going to be the first.
And we will. Can we just pause on that for a second? We
cool.
will be the first nuclear project financing. That is rad.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That'll
be all you too.
We're the first nuclear development platform, right? We're the first like those things are super cool.
Yeah. Okay. And what are you looking forward to over the next 6, 12, 24 months?
Oof. What am I not looking forward to? No, I think the pipeline looks super, super good. Bringing on new team members to execute on that development activity. That momentum is just going to feed right back into the project capital process, right? Coming back to, again, maybe it's tired, but this development platform idea, right? The whole business is that flywheel of opportunities. Opportunities, execution, feeds into the next set of opportunities, feeds into the next set of execution. And then, having to build the business around that, right? All of the boring, how does the business actually move capital and move resources, and how those are all things that I understand in theory, but we have team members now that have done that for the umpteenth time, and sort of getting exposed to that is super exciting as well. Right? There's always got to be something you're learning, something that you're kind of pushing yourself on.
How do you feel about taking on more management responsibilities? We keep throwing more and more people under you. That's not going to stop. Any hesitation around that?
No hesitation, but that's sort of what I'm alluding to on how to figure out how to manage that, how to onboard more efficiently, how to create growth opportunities for those people, right? In different roles, I've had different sort of training responsibilities, but it's different to really say, okay, what does this person want to do now? What do they want to do a year from now? What do they want to do 5 years from now? And how do you kind of create that path?
And how about setting strategy amongst a diverse set of talents that maybe you haven't, and disciplines that maybe you haven't managed before?
I think the most fun of it, I'm actually going to answer a slightly different question, because it starts in identifying the talent that you're trying to bring in, right? The skill set that you're trying to augment the team. So it's one thing to sort of take over a leadership role with a team that exists, but the sort of fun and challenge of building it from scratch, I think, avoids some of that. Rightly or wrongly, makes me less worried about that, because I have been a little more proactive, or tried to be, on these are the types of personalities that we need to supplement the team with, not just the core skill sets. So I'm kind of sidestepping your question, but that is the part that I'm still figuring out, right? And I've sort of asked different mentors about, and how do you identify those gaps? How do you try to predict future gaps, especially with an organization that's growing and evolving and may change so quickly on a month-to-month basis?
When you listen, it's a tough job. I know I'm not that easy to deal with either. What motivates you? What part of the vision? What part of the vision in the future is the thing that you visualize when you want to motivate yourself to get through the most challenging aspects of the role?
I think the opportunity for scale. I mean, look, we are solving such key problems, right? And the opportunity to do that at a almost mind-boggling scale, both scale of organization, scale of megawatts, volume of transaction activity, right? Like that universe is just such a cool place. It's such a great place for society, right? It's a great place to live, but it's such a cool company to like be a part of and optimize. Because like it's probably every day we're like, oh man, this would be really cool, but let's just, that's a 12-month from now thing, or that's a 24-month from now thing, right? I think those are the opportunities that really kind of get you through some of the grind. And that's sort of development in a nutshell, right? It is a grind.
Development is a grind.
Yeah. In business building, it's a grind. We're doing both.
Before I ask you the last question, any just kind of high-level thoughts you want to share while you've got this platform?
Again, I should be prepared for these questions now since I've been on the other side. No, I don't think so. I'm trying to think if I had
any key insights that you learned from podcasting since you just mentioned it. Not everyone knows we try to make everyone be a podcast host at this company. Anything that you learned?
Yeah, we should. Anything that I learned?
Maybe that's a whole other episode unto itself.
It's probably a whole other episode. It might be worth. That is one of the like sort of what would you call it? Like dessert fun things, right? Like you can't have too much of it, but it is. Like maybe once a week, twice a week, I get to jump on the phone with a subject matter expert from some aspect of energy or financial markets and get to pick their brain for an hour. Like, how cool is that?
It's very cool.
And yeah, every episode there's like a couple nuggets. So I had an episode this morning that will air probably in 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know what our backlog looks like.
Yeah.
But he had a really interesting observation, right? He was like, everyone talks about power generation when it comes to decarbonization. He was like there's a little bit, but really not much around sustainable fuels, renewable fuels, biomass, like the chemicals sector that is still so hydrocarbon driven. I want to like actually peel back some of the layers and understand. I mean, that's such a wide universe in and of itself, but like, I never really stepped back, right? I've been in power generation for so long. I've never really kind of stepped back and thought about that. And we have some sustainable fuels customers sort of in the pipeline. But yeah, thinking about that as an equally large market, but without the same level of activity or sort of attention, well, that's where opportunities come, right? Big market, people not paying attention. Big market or big problem of people not paying attention. So yeah, those are just kind of cool tidbits that come out of those conversations.
Another question.
Yeah.
Then the last question.
What's the rule? Never say it's your last question.
Yeah, exactly. Any heterodox opinions you hold? And they don't even have to be about nuclear energy.
Heterodox opinions I hold.
Sorry, I didn't prep you for this.
Yeah, you should have prepped me for that one. That one feels like I need to think about it some. I don't know if this is heterodox. I think pragmatism is far too undervalued in our society. Because I consider myself, and understanding some of my personality, there's a reason for that, but I consider myself like pretty pragmatic to sometimes an uncomfortable degree for some people. Because I will change my mind very quickly if presented with alternative evidence. And then you see it in like political discourse and social discourse, like how that is thrown around as such a negative thing. Like we can't have pragmatism. There's really no use of having science. So there's no use, right? Like if you're not going to change your mind when confronted with additional evidence, like why seek additional evidence to begin with, right? And so I don't know if that's really a heterodox opinion. Maybe it's a heterodox observation. Such thing exists.
Well, no, I think your willingness to see it and articulate it is quite interesting because while most people might say that agree with that, their actions probably belie that reality.
Yeah. So it's hard. You don't want to say like, oh, I was wrong, or like, but yeah, you never know everything. Like you're never ever going to know everything. So yeah.
Well, listen, that's just another way that you embody the core DNA of this company because we that's what we encourage here. Yeah. Okay, final question now. If you could choose Lily's first word, what would it be?
Ooh. Well, Audrey's my wife, Audrey is claiming that Lily has said dada.
Okay.
She has said dada, but she has no idea, but she's just like making random words.
Yeah.
But dada would probably be top of mind.
Nothing like
No.
Or nuclear or
No.
Or uranium.
She has a book, Atomic Science for Babies. She has read it. She will continue to read it. Episode 1000, here we come.
Our leadership in science and industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligations to ourselves as well as others, all require us to make this effort, to solve these mysteries, to solve them for the good of all men and for the progress of all people.